Thanks, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Chance Johnson. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Integral Ad Science. Very excited to be here today to discuss the importance of a really big topic, partnerships and industry collaboration. So why is it so important? Well, it's no secret, worldwide content creation is accelerating at a rate that we've just never seen before. And brand strategy needs to stay ahead of these emerging trends and breaking news that we see on a daily basis. So as marketers try to address these issues at a global scale, tech providers have to work together to solve the challenges of tomorrow. At IAS, we know the digital ad industry can only sustain its growth by leveraging technology that understands the complexities of the digital ecosystem, but also upholds the value of premium inventory. So to continue innovating, our industry needs adaptable solutions. And I'm very lucky to be joined today by two pioneers in their field who are focused on exactly that. Tony Chen is the CEO of Channel Factory, and Will Luttrell is the CEO of Amino Payments. Can you both tell me a little bit about yourselves and what your companies do? Tony, why don't you kick us off?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me here. My name is Tony Chen, CEO and founder of Channel Factory. Channel Factory, we are a platform very focused around the YouTube and social video ecosystem to address brand suitability, contextual targeting, and performance with a big focus on YouTube.
Right. How about you, Will?
Hi, I'm Will Luttrell. I'm the CEO and founder of Amino Payments. Amino is a company focused on bringing transparency and supply path optimization to programmatic advertising.
All right. So why don't we get into the questions? We're here to talk about collaboration. Can you each tell me what industry collaboration means to you? And then piggyback, what does it mean for the priorities for your business?
Sure, I'll go first. Industry collaboration is at the very heart of Amino's business model. At the core, what we do is we take data from partners like Integral Ad Science around viewability, brand safety, attribution companies, and other types of data, and combine that with supply path data that we're getting from DSPs, exchanges, and publishers. So you could say that Amino Payments basically is a collaborative company in that we bring all these pieces together.
That's great. What about you, Tony?
Awesome. Yeah. In terms of collaboration, our goal is, the UGC ecosystem where we live, especially in the YouTube and now Facebook, et cetera. There's very little standardization, right? So, for us, our goal is to kind of really collaborate to kind of bring that standardization around content quality, around suitability, and a lot of it, quite frankly, is just really, what can we help achieve for the end customer? How can we collaborate so that we achieve a 1 + 1 = 3 scenario? And I think the three pillars that are really important are simplicity, price efficiency, and just effectiveness for the advertiser. So yeah.
Thanks. And we'll keep it with you, Tony, because we practice what we preach here when it comes to partnership. So Channel Factory and IAS recently teamed up. We released a product called Channel Science. It'd be great for you to tell us a bit about the product and how it emerged.
Absolutely. So Channel Science is a combination of a lot of really awesome elements of IAS and Channel Factory. And what it is a comprehensive YouTube solution that achieves 4 things. 1 is brand suitability. 2 is contextual targeting. 3 is performance optimization. And the last is brand safety verification. So, our goal is to kind of combine the background of, for example, the brand safety verification background from IAS with the performance and contextual targeting of Channel Factory. And our ultimate goal of the partnership from a customer facing perspective at the same time is to help people with more simple operations and price efficiencies. And the way that the partnership emerged is we looked at the big opportunity of the YouTube ecosystem. YouTube is scaling significantly as TV dollars are going there, and the standards of those type of advertisers and the brand suitability and brand safety needs are much more. And our goal is to kind of come together and build something to address these advertiser needs.
Yeah. To follow up, so there's no question brand suitability is the cornerstone of our business and Channel Factories. Can you give some guidance on what's the financial impact for an advertiser with not finding brand suitable environments within YouTube, or maybe the benefits of finding them easily?
Absolutely. So I think there's two things. One is, brand suitability can lead into either media waste, or it can be essentially from a brand equity perspective. So, and brand suitability is a combination of, is it the right kind of content for what you're going after. So on that media waste side, it's basically, for example, shared devices is a huge issue. Now we're all at home. Many of us are sharing devices with our kids or our siblings or our parents. And an ad, let's say for an auto advertiser that's meant for me is not great for a 6-year-old, right? And so that is one around media wastage is, if you're an auto advertiser, is that the right impression? And the second is around just brand equity. And brand equity, quite frankly, is priceless, and especially in these sensitive times that we are in, brand association with the wrong type of content is extremely damaging. So those are the two things from a brand suitability perspective.
Yeah, really helpful. Thank you for the additional context there. Will, I want to change gears from suitability and talk a little bit about transparency for a minute. So the digital ad industry has changed, has evolved quite quickly in 2020 for many reasons. But PwC and ISBA recently put out a study that was pretty shocking to a lot of us, which it highlighted the lack of transparency in the programmatic ecosystem. And the number that stood out was, on average, publishers are actually receiving about half of the advertising spend, right? So the question I have for you is, how can advertisers change their approach, make sure that they're working directly with publishers, and try to create some meaningful change for transparency over the next, call it 18 months?
So what we're seeing at Amino is that advertisers are now starting to shift from a purely property publisher point of view. So you may be buying yahoo.com, you're spending a certain amount of your budget there as an example, to how you're buying that property. So you may have already done the hard work of consolidating down to maybe 1 or 2 DSPs, for example, but you're still buying that same property on 20 exchanges, and you're still buying that same property on 50 different sellers on those exchanges. And what we're finding is that the quality, and that quality means everything from how viewable, how brand suitable, how much potentially fraudulent activities going on, varies dramatically over those 50 different pathways. So advertisers are now beginning to focus more on that middle layer and consolidating down, getting rid of the least quality, say 15 or 20 of those 50, and focusing the dollars on the best 10, for example, and using new metrics that are focused more on the cost per quality impression, as opposed to simply saying, I'm buying yahoo.com, they got 10% of my budget.
Yeah, and clearly less wastage, more transparency, like it actually drives more revenue into the ad ecosystem because the performance is going to be better. It's going to drive better results, and everybody wins in that environment. So I did have a follow-up. So in addition to the channel science partnership that we did with Channel Factory, we released a partnership with Amino Payments called Total Visibility. Can you talk about that partnership and whether or not you think that it will help solve some of those gaps between the buy side and the sell side?
Absolutely. So for the very first time on every single impression for an ad campaign, we're able to join the brand safety, brand suitability, viewability information with the complete supply path and financial information on every impression, and put it all in one user interface that has direct, actionable information that can help advertisers choose the supply path, the best, most efficient supply path to get to that inventory. That increases confidence in that channel, which of course increases spend in that channel and better outcomes for the advertisers. And we've seen this repeated time and time again for some of the biggest advertisers in the world.
Yeah, it's great. Follow up to that, what are the practical steps that an advertiser can take, right? Because what we're talking about is a significant overhaul of the way they're looking at their digital investment. But what are the first couple of steps that you'd recommend an advertiser taking to obtain more transparency into where their ad budgets are going?
So you cannot change what you cannot measure. So the very first thing is to look for partnerships to start collecting the data and get it in front of you to start measuring this kind of quality. But following shortly on the heels of that is making sure that you have the correct legal and business partnerships in place to even access the data. Frequently, what we find is that advertisers who take a closer and deeper look into their budgets, along with their partners at the agencies, will hit a wall of transparency when they find that they don't have access to certain supply chain information from exchanges or resellers that are further down the hop. And so owning those relationships is becoming an increasingly big part of many large brands thinking about how they buy their media in 2020 and 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, makes total sense. So as we think more philosophically about partnerships and joint products, how do you think that this benefits the broader advertising ecosystem? And is it better to work with a select group of a few partners, or is it a volume of partnerships that you think will win the day?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the industry that we're in is, going to further consolidation from an operational perspective, and also from also in terms of like measurement and making sure that people understand where they're spending money and what they're getting, right? So as that happens, bundle solutions are much more important from an easy execution perspective, but at the same time, making sure that the measurement and the metric that they use for, let's say, YouTube is the same that they use for programmatic or other media channels, right? So that consolidation is very important versus a disbursement of many different vendors.
So I guess what I'm hearing you saying is the consolidation is important, but maybe the key element there is consistency, and consistency is going to make it a lot easier for advertisers.
Absolutely.
Will, what's your thought on these partnerships and joint products, and whether or not is more of them is better, or a few select ones is ideal?
So I love Tony's point on essentially standardization and consistency. I would add to that, Chance, to answer your question, that many of the customers that we talk to are experiencing login fatigue.
Yeah.
Having a different login for this purpose and that purpose and another purpose, and then we come to them with a supply path optimization offering, or or a way to offer more financial or supply path transparency, and it's adding another login to the pile. And so with partnerships, you have the opportunity to collate several of these logins into a single screen that gives the customer the information they need. There's really not a reason why you should log into 3 different screens when in actuality you are looking at the same ad campaign. So these working together and providing a unified view, I think is going to be very appealing for advertisers going forward.
Yeah, very different focuses of your companies, but basically the same answer, which gets back to how do we make advertisers and agencies' lives a little bit easier? Fewer screens to look at, fewer UIs to look at, and ultimately trying to help them be more effective, but also more efficient with their time. Good stuff. Tony, let's shift back to suitability a little bit. 2020, again, and we don't need to harp on it for all the reasons that we know. It's been a bit of a wild ride. As you think about brand suitability in YouTube, how do the current circumstances, whether it be pandemic related, election related, Black Lives Matter, the social justice events that have been going on around the world. How does that impact the future of YouTube?
Yeah, absolutely. So, UGC content now is much more diverse than it was before ever, right? And a lot of it's just because like people have more time, right? And people are consuming more content. There is no like TV shows. I mean, yeah, there's no real new TV shows coming out, or movies. So the plethora of content is really creating kind of like a change of standardization. Now, forays have come out with different structures around brand suitability and GARM of recent. But as we kind of look at the diversification of the new content types that are coming out in the YouTube ecosystem, especially by UGC, standardization is going to be much more. It's going to evolve quite more to get there. So I think like as YouTube evolves. Especially this year, it's also like what's interesting is accelerating the need of a new standardization, and for advertisers to really understand, okay, I can't just think about PG-13 rated R. I have to think about for kids kind of content. Okay, what does that consist of, right? There's a whole plethora of different levels. And for comedy, there's a whole different levels game there, and also news, right? So that's been pretty interesting, and I think that's adoption of that and new standardization are going to be key.
Yeah, and the benefit for advertisers on YouTube over, call it traditional television, is just the sheer volume of options, right? And brand suitability plays into that, where you can pick a particular program or a channel that you feel like matches the personality and tone of your brand. With that benefit of volume and scale, you deal with increased risk, right? And so, obviously why we introduced channel science to help solve for some of that.
Absolutely.
One more question, and this one is pie in the sky, forward looking. You're industry experts. I'm sure everybody wants to hear your opinion on this. As we look into the future, let's call it 5 years out, what current opportunities do you think have the greatest potential to really impact the ad ecosystem for the good? Why don't you move over to Will and run with this one?
All right. I'm personally very excited about the future of attribution. And near the beginning of this session, I was pointing out the different data in collaboration that we're pulling in. So what we're finding, and I think this is going to become a trend. So much like transparency is having its moment, I think if I'm looking out, reworking attribution is going to have its moment. What we're finding is that some of the ads, sometimes many of the ads that are getting credit for performance and sales are not viewable. And so ads that never made it onto a screen are being given credit for sales at some of the top CPGs, financial services firms worldwide. So I think the next kind of wave will be a strong look at that. It's kind of the evolution of transparency from impression level, ad served, cost per viewable ad, to cost to correctly attributed sale. And that opens up an entire category of marketer that is more focused on performance and less focused on a strict brand messaging campaign.
Yeah, it's a good point. And this is an entirely different panel, so another conversation for another day. But with the deprecation of cookies, it's going to make view-through attribution really, really challenging. And so I totally agree that attribution is an interesting battleground over the next 5 years. Tony, would love your input and your perspective on currently what's going on that you think over the next 5 years is going to have a really big impact.
Absolutely. I also was going to talk about attribution,
Okay.
but there's another point. So in terms of attribution, and we kind of feel it in the YouTube ecosystem quite a bit. Most people, just because of how YouTube is set up, there is no way of doing multi-touch right now, right? Unless you're just measuring the click-throughs. And what's really interesting is there's a lot of missed opportunities. There's just because, like, to Will's point, everyone's looking at last click, They're not looking at what is driving towards that. So here's some anecdotes that we've seen from companies I personally invested into, more D2C brands. When they do, YouTube or just broader digital advertising spend or digital video spend, they're finding that they're, mostly it's Facebook attribution, right? Their Facebook cost per acquisition is actually decreases as they increase the spend of more mid-funnel kind of digital video spends across the board. So I think the multi-touch attribution world it's going to be extremely important, and that's going to happen, quite frankly, because media and platforms are getting much more consolidated, right? And so that's going to enable things like that to happen. Now, between the walled gardens, that's where it's going to be interesting, right? I think just like in China, there's the BAT, Baidu, Ali, and Tencent. And in the US, we have the FANGs, right? And the FANGs are all going to have their own worlds of how do you do attribution. It's going to be really interesting to see how the multi-touch works across the different platforms, because they don't want to talk to each other. They don't want to share data with each other, right? So that's going to be really interesting. I think the second thing, and I think this is a topic everyone talks about at this point, is just the acceleration of how fast OTT is happening, right?
Yep.
And a lot of it is just flexibility. But what's really interesting is, people are saying, hey, this is really disrupting the TV world. Absolutely, from a viewership perspective. But, at the same time, a lot of the inventory sits with the publishers, which are the TV companies themselves, right? At the same time. So I think it's just going to be an interesting evolution of that world. But it's going to fast track how OTT is adopted. But at the same time, fraud and transparency is going to be much more important in that world, because there's not that much OTT inventory per se to kind of fill all the money at this point, right? And there's a lot of what we're seeing, just kind of like mobile inventory being categorized as OTT, right? So that's going to be a tricky thing. Is you're buying mobile inventory for like a few dollars CPM, all of a sudden it gets categorized as OTT, and you're paying like 10x, or 5x. So that's going to be an interesting trend too.
Yeah. If there's one thing we know for sure, fraudsters follow the money. So if money's going into OTT, fraudsters will be there. And I think it's incredibly important that companies like ours continue to partner, share in our tech resources to be able to solve some of these really big challenges for advertisers. All right, guys, that's all the questions I had. We have a few minutes, and I did see a couple of questions coming in on the chat box. If you're game, you mind taking a couple of questions from some of the attendees?
Sure. Yeah.
All right, let's see what we got. Okay. Here's one from one of our brand customers. Will, this is definitely in your wheelhouse, but Tony, I would love for you to take a crack at it as well. Start with you though, Will. What is your advice to media buyers looking to balance media quality with cost?
Well, that's definitely on the nose, Chance. What I would say is that you have to look at combining both of those two metrics, because right now you might get various media quality judgments, and then you've got cost judgments. And the only way you can marry those two has been volumetrically. So let's suppose you had 5% not brand suitable and maybe 20% unviewable. And so you're only able to apply those at a gross volume level to cost. I would say that you have to marry those two at the impression level. And what you will find is that sometimes the unviewable or the not brand suitable inventory or whatever is much more expensive on an impression by impression level. So that 10 to 15% challenge that you have from a volumetric point of view is a 30 or 40% challenge when you add up the actual cost of that inventory. So you have to look to partnerships that can marry up the quality and the cost on every impression.
Completely agree, 100%. Nailed it. Tony, anything else to add there? I mean, certainly cost and quality is incredibly important to Channel Factory as well.
Absolutely. I think it's definitely a balance, right? If you want the cheapest cost, obviously, there's different types of inventory you can buy there. At least in the YouTube world, I think it's really important to really understand the nuances of the platform, to understand what it's comfortable with, And that has a lot to do with suitability. And, we've kind of created a very extensive survey to really understand, okay, is this the right type, or is this not right for a specific advertiser? And I think that balances out, is really understanding what you're going to get into versus like, hey, let's just, here's my CPV goal only, and let's try to achieve that with tier 1 content. It's kind of like, you really have to be open and understand, okay, what are the inventory sources out there from a content perspective?
And if I can add on just one more thing, Chance,
Sure.
because what Tony said, I think is so important. The overall piece of advice I would give would be to don't chase cost as your only metric. I was told by a client earlier this week that low viewable or unviewable ads actually perform quite well. And that is something that stuck with me. And it's something I've been kind of chewing on throughout the week. And the reason why it, quote unquote, performs well is because it is, they were buying a bunch of very cheap inventory and misattributing performance to ads that people can never see. So if you're not marrying those two pieces of data, quality and cost, you could be making a bad decision. Maybe something that's if something is half as expensive, but it's 3 times less viewable, then you're losing money on that. Sometimes you have to pay for the performance.
Yeah, I mean, it's a dangerous statement that unviewable ads perform well. Will, is there, following up on the attendee's question, is there advice that you would give to someone within whether it's an agency or a brand organization that has to fight to obtain sort of this more expensive, higher quality premium inventory that might not perform as well as some of the lower cost, potentially unviewable stuff?
So, an unviewed ad cannot contribute to any kind of brand outcome. And I'm reminded, without waxing poetic, I'm reminded of a quote by Abraham Lincoln. He said, he asked an audience, he said, "How many legs does a dog have if we count the tail as a leg?" When the audience answered 5, he corrected them, "No, the actual answer is 4. It doesn't matter what you call a tail. The dog has 4 legs." And that's the quote that I'm reminded of when people tell me that unviewable ads, perform. I say that you have to start engaging in a metric that it doesn't matter if you use Amino's technology or other technology. Start engaging in a metric QCPM. That is your cost to actually get media that meets a certain quality metric, however you define it. So if you're tasked with buying 1,000 viewable, brand suitable, fraud-free impressions, you're going to have to buy not 1,000. You have to buy 1,200, 1,300, 1,400, 1,500. Start focusing on that number. How much are you actually paying to get to 1,000 qualified or quality metrics? And at that point, you will have something in your hands that you can take back to whoever it is you need to convince to justify paying this maybe slightly more expensive price, but way more quality and way lower QCPM inventory.
Very, very astute advice. And I always say it's not really a great panel until somebody has quoted Abraham Lincoln. So I think that's a great time to wrap it up. Guys, I just wanted to say thank you so much for the partnership. Thank you for sharing your perspective. And we look forward to continue working together to solve some of these really big challenges that advertisers are facing. So thanks so much. And with that, we'll kick it back to Sarah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.